Okay. All right. I don't want to be too loud on this thing. Howdy. Did anybody stay up late like I did watching that exciting baseball game? All right. Omaha, here we come. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. It's been a while since I've been over here to ASC Dallas, but it's good to see that the group and the membership is going strong and all the young and experienced faces that are in the crowd. So welcome. Um, Clayton and I are here to talk to you a little bit about this project, this little bitty project that you may have driven through, or as some of you in the audience may have lived through if you were going to Baylor University at the time. So we'll get started here. All right, let me make sure. I got to point this way. All right. Up. Go too far. Up. All right. So to kick things off, a little historical perspective from a second grade book report. This is my daughter, Emery, and she had to do a book report and a history night presentation. She had to choose a historical figure, and she loves cars. So can anybody guess who this historical figure is? Any guesses out there? Henry Ford. That's right, Henry Ford. Um, I captured this quote just doing a little bit of background research on Henry Ford. I thought it was very appropriate for today's world. We just don't do. We need to listen to our kids. They really tell us the answers to just about everything that we're looking for. And for mine, it's no different when we're in the car and we're driving through a construction job on the highway. I literally hear the words, "Dad, why did you have to mess up this road too?" So, so Henry Ford, and let's see. See the okay. All right. So yeah, we're gonna have to wait. All right. So Henry Ford. Henry Ford was in doing the book report, I learned lots of new things about Henry Ford. For one, at age 13, he was given a pocket watch, took it apart, put it back together, and for the rest of his life, that was his hobby, was repairing watches. Um, but most of y'all probably know Henry Ford for the Model T. The Model T vehicle was and it will always be one of the biggest selling vehicles in the world, 15 million, in fact. And, a big part of that and how that could happen is that he invented the assembly line, right? Um, so what does this have to do? What does Henry Ford, what does this book report have to do with Waco? Well, for me, my perspective has always been public side. It's been the pillars of transportation here, not only in Texas, but federally. And if you look back in history, DeWitt C. Greer is regarded as the father of the highway system here in Texas. Spent 54 years of his career working for TxDOT. And then you look at the Eisenhower administration in 1956 with the Federal Highway Act. And as working for 10 years for TxDOT, I kind of leaned on the public perspective that, these guys were the ones that really set the way for our transportation network. But if you look back at Henry Ford, and if you look at the Waco project here specifically, the invention of the Model T had a transformative impact, probably just as greater than those guys that worked for the government, because the assembly line allowed folks to buy a vehicle in that time back in the 1900s. It allowed them to do things they hadn't been able to do, like travel to places they'd never been, go on vacations that they never thought possible, and in effect establish many more main streets across America than what the railroad could ever do or what horseback could ever do. And that case is prevalent here in Waco, Texas. We took a little trip there not recently, went to the Dr. Pepper Museum, and guess who pops up at the Dr. Pepper Museum? Henry Ford. Because of Henry Ford's Model T, the Dr. Pepper machine there in Waco was able to not only stay local, but used the automobile to distribute Dr. Pepper across the South, across the state of Texas, and turn into a very powerful company. So what does this have to do with 35 Waco? Well, 35 in Waco, you have all these main streets now. The car has helped that come along, but 35 is Main Street, Texas. It serves as the major thoroughfare for travelers, for goods and freight, and for local commuters and cities and suburbs to travel all across Texas. Waco, where it sits, it's the heart. It's the heart of Main Street, Texas. It's right in the center of the state, and it's in the center of the population. In fact, where Waco sits, you're a 3 hour drive, 3 hours drive from anywhere you live in Waco. You're at 85% of the Texas population. Tourism is huge in Waco. Approximately 1.8 million people visit Waco every year. And in 2018, right before the pandemic, they hit a peak of 2.6 million visitors. A lot of that can be attributed to what you see there on the screen, the Chip and Joanna Empire that's there in Waco, and it continues to go strong. But why does Waco become the heart of Texas? And a perspective that I never thought about is you had Henry Ford on the private side building vehicles, transforming America. And then you had people like Dwight Eisenhower and DeWitt C. Greer transforming America on the public side. It's amazing when you bring public and private together when they're under the common goal and moving things forward. Because when you bring them together, it's unmatched. We can do anything possible when we both come together and work as a team. And because of that teamwork in Waco on the 35 4B project, we were able to be successful. We started that job in April of 2019. We cut the ribbon and opened the facility fully in November of 2022. For those that work in transportation and on a major interstate project, a little over 3 years is quite an amazing feat when you're reconstructing 7 miles of interstate from right-of-way line to right-of-way line. That would not have been possible without the innovative approach from TxDOT and the out-of-the-box thinking from the contractor and the CEI and all those involved with the project. Because we worked as one team, we understood the mission, we worked in tandem, we worked through challenges, we were able to finish that job 7 months ahead of schedule. But to get there, got a little user innovative, and we got to have a contract. So I'm going to turn it over to Clayton. He's going to talk y'all through what that contract looked like.
I appreciate that. So sticking with the history theme, wanted to talk a little bit about the history of I-35 through the Waco district. This has been an ongoing process for the last 20 plus years. You can see we've had 17 plus construction projects. I've had the privilege, or I don't know if privilege is the right word. I know Mr. Hutchins can attest to that. It's been some tough times, but we had varying levels of success over those 20 years or so. And that's kind of highlighted by this graph here. I don't know how well you can see on the screen, but this is a summary of the major projects through the Waco district. As you can see on the bottom, those numbers highlighted in red there, those indicate a 10+% increase in both cost and time. You can see the vast majority of those jobs experienced that increase. As mentioned, I lived through the bulk of the ones you see in red, so definitely took some lessons from that. But all in all, you're looking at a roughly 13% increase in cost across the corridor. On average, each project was looking at roughly 25% increase on time. So knowing that, and then considering the importance of I-35, as Blake spelled out earlier, we were staring at 4B right in the face. And the district was bound and determined to not let history repeat itself. But just some bullet points here. This section of the interstate was built in the 60s, so it was an aging infrastructure, roughly 6 miles of interstate right through the heart of Waco. Got some major stakeholders, as Blake mentioned. You've got Baylor, City of Waco, City of Belmead, and we were looking at over 125,000 cars a day through the corridor. The scope of our project, we're going from 6 lanes to 8. 21 bridges were to be reconstructed, 13 different U-turns, and then we were going to an X configuration with all of the entrance and exit ramps. One of the key differences with this project that kind of separates it from the others is this is one of the few that actually had all right-of-way in place and all franchise utilities relocated prior to the project. So knowing that, TxDOT had the opportunity to be a little more aggressive than they traditionally were with this type of project. So the district took some time, reviewed all the accelerated construction methods that were available from FHWA, reviewed past projects, but one of the things that really stuck out was the cap of incentives and disincentives at 5% of the contract cost. Historically, the district was much lower than that. You're talking 1-2% tops. Really no major milestones, kind of focused on getting key intersections open, key ramps open, instead of focusing on the big picture and getting the project done. So that got us to looking at the road user costs through this section. At $100,000 per day, again, that was an opportunity for us to set a road user cost in this contract that let the contractor really be aggressive with the schedule and really drive the schedule. Within the incentive and disincentive package, things we considered is, although Waco is a major corridor, there's really no feasible alternate route other than Loop 340. Loop 340 is a 2-lane facility for much of the corridor, multiple intersections, so it wasn't really going to be a feasible route in the event of a major incident with 125,000 plus cars a day. As mentioned earlier, the age and condition of the pavement was deteriorating quickly. We were dealing with sometimes weekly pavement failures, bridge failures that were causing massive delays. So that was something that TxDOT was really focused on, is we had to get traffic off of that old pavement and onto new as fast as we possibly could. So I'll get to the phasing in just a minute, but there are 2 internal milestones that we really focused on. One involved putting all 6 lanes of traffic reduced down to 4 on the existing pavement. That represented the highest risk to the department. The next phase was actually getting those same 4 lanes on the new pavement, but again, because of the reduced capacity, something that we wanted to expedite. Another thing we considered was adding a lane rental bank. We wanted our contractor to be as efficient as possible with lane closures, try to combine operations and not just have singular operations that seem to string out night after night. So here's kind of the overall phasing of the project. On the left-hand side, you can see existing main lanes, 3 lanes in each direction. The first internal milestone here involves moving all traffic on the old pavement, again, reduced from 6 to 4 lanes. That became milestone 1 or B1 as part of the contract. Milestone 2, taking that same traffic, putting it on the newly constructed southbound main lanes while the contractor completed northbound, ultimately getting everybody opened up with 8 lanes on new pavement. So one thing we looked at with this contract is some of the issues we had on past contracts is that the milestones were very singular to an exit ramp, to an intersection, and were very narrow. We wanted to set it based on performance, and what it allowed is the contractor to have some flexibility on the work they got done before actually triggering one of the milestones. So I've got a graphic here that kind of spells that out. I know there's a lot going on here, but so what we ended up with is you've got project start on the far left-hand side and ultimately ending up in project completion here. Within that, you've got the start of milestone 1, which was putting traffic on old pavement, and the end of milestone 1. What we did is we set up a no excuse bonus for the contractor to meet that date. But then what we also did is 5 days either side of the no excuse incentive, we had kind of a no harm, no foul time period in there. But should the contractor finish early, I lost my pointer here. Should the contractor finish early, we actually had a 50-day window in here where the contractor could earn an increasing bonus based on the road user cost for that particular phase. So the same thing goes for milestone 2. Here you can see some overlap where once you move one direction to new pavement, that clock starts. And then same thing, you're set up with a no excuse bonus here for meeting that date, no harm, no foul window, and then a 50-day time period where you can earn a maximum incentive. One thing to note too is at the end of each of these is we set up a disincentive that had no maximum. So while the incentive was capped at a maximum, the disincentive continued until you completed that phase. And then at the end of the project, we had the same setup with substantial completion. You had a no excuse incentive, a no harm, no foul window, and then a 55-day maximum incentive date there. And then we set up 50 days from substantial completion to project completion to complete all remaining work, and then LDs would trigger at that point. So taking that graph and putting some numbers to it, this is what we ended up with. So milestone 1, again, being our highest risk phase where all traffic's on old pavement. We set a road user cost of $75,000 a day. What that equates to is you end up with a potential of 3.375 million in incentives. And then I mentioned the no excuse, another 2 million on top of that should the contractor meet that date. Moving into milestone 2, the road user cost goes down to $60,000 a day with a maximum incentive of 2.7 million plus another $1 million in no excuse bonus. One thing we did do is if the contractor were to miss that first milestone, we actually rolled half of that dollar amount over to the next milestone. So if I'm contractor and I miss milestone 1, I still have incentive to chase milestone 2 and keep the project on time. And then the same thing from milestone 2 to substantial completion. Substantial completion, again, was set at a little bit lower rate at $50,000 a day with a maximum incentive of 2.5 million and another 2.5 in substantial no excuse bonus. The contractor could earn up to $1 million with the lane rental bonus. So we started out with I forget what the total dollars was, but we had a bank of dollars for lane closures. And as the contractor closed hours, we were charging at the hourly rates you see here. If they closed the lane down during the day, we were charging $20,000 per hour per lane. That would encourage the contractor to work in the evening when it was a much lower rate of $2,000 per hour per lane. And basically whatever was left in that balance at the end of the job, the contractor could get that paid back in the form of a bonus up to that $1 million. So when it's all said and done, contractor had an opportunity to earn just over $15 million in incentives on this project. So here's a look at what we got at the bid table. Weber was the low bidder on the project. I think one thing that's interesting to note is they actually were not the low bidder as far as cost to do the work. And they were actually not the shortest duration as far as getting the job done. However, they were the most aggressive with that internal milestone that was the highest risk value to the department. And that's ultimately what set them apart and got them the job. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Blake, and he's going to go over some of the highlights of construction.
Thanks, Clayton. So yeah, now we've got a contract in place. We've got a contractor in place. Got to go build a job. And as I don't know if you watched Chip and Joanna, but we definitely started demo day without Chip on site. Oh, there it is right there. So this is there at Barron's Circle in Belmead. This will be in the second half of the job. These pan girder bridges are very finicky when you take them down demo wise. So it was important for us to have a good safety plan in place, a good demo plan in place. This bridge probably took, believe it or not, it probably took less than an hour to collapse. Just to think about that. You've been driving over these bridges for years, and all it took was a little hammering for about 30 minutes to bring it down. One of the challenges to kind of play to what Clayton's talking about are those milestones. So when we dive into the milestones, what are the critical points of construction that we've got to focus in on and get done? One of those key areas was the business 7735 interchange. The existing interchange, if you recall, it was more or less a 4-level interchange there. You had your surface streets, then you had business 77 elevated, you had 35 elevated, and then there were a couple of direct connectors connecting 35 with 77. The existing structure here, you can kind of, you see it. All right, make sure I got so you see the bent caps here right within the intersection. Those are holding up both northbound and southbound I-35. So we've got to flip traffic. We've got to get them into a head-to-head condition and build southbound and get them all on the northbound bridge. We're going to need some kind of temporary shoring plan for this. So the original design called for installing 2 columns to hold up the northbound lanes. right here. The contractor reviewed this plan by the engineer and said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I got some limitations. I'm going to need a specialty drill to come in here to put in one of those columns because it's directly underneath the existing deck that I have to keep in service. That's a very high risk potential considering that we're about to saw this thing in half and put all traffic on one side and pray to God that it doesn't fail. So they came with us with an updated plan to change this out. And so the contractor proposed this pier cap design, a single column design with a pre-stressed system on it. Within this plan, the engineer noted that it would handle compression forces with the pier cap set up with the foundation there. And also you have your pre-stressing system, which is right here, a little hard to see, to handle the uplift and transmit any tensile forces to the pier cap and then the foundation here. This plan allowed for a standard drill rig to be used, and it expedited construction at a critical location. And just some photos of that. So you got your standard drill rig over here on the left, getting started with those the foundation shafts, and then the guys are there pouring the actual foundation cap on the ground. Here you've got the guy there. The workers are in the process of pouring the cap on top of the pier column, and then installation of the pre-stressing system is occurring here. Then we got to stress those PT bars. We got to follow the sequence and reach 280 kips. Our inspector here, Brandon, was over that, giving the thumbs up that they had met the requirements. So the night of the demo for once we got the shoring in place, a lot of concern with what could happen, how should we approach this. We're very detailed in our review of the demo plan. And as you can see here in the video, it's a little slow, but you see in the video there a little bit, we had 2 hammers on it working in tandem to ensure there was no twisting motion of that existing bent cap. This was a very nerve-wracking night. Clayton and I remember it well because, as you guys know, if this doesn't go well, all the 35 is down on the frontage road, and we don't know how long that might have been. So luckily, everything went off without a hitch, successful. I brought, if you're a nerd like me and think things are cool, this right here is a number 18 rebar. This is very rarely used in highway construction. Typically, you find it on a nice fancy bridge or building over the bay, right, Ryan? You don't find it in Waco, Texas. Well, it was there, and these guys were pulling it out right there at 77. So here's the aftermath, something out of an apocalyptic movie, as I used to say. So one of the other challenges to meet the milestones, obviously, was building the new bridges over the Brazos River. Before we even got started, we had a lot of conversations about the different critical aspects, being from an environmental perspective, how do we protect the river and ensure during demolition operations and material placement operations, we don't get anything in the river. How do we protect recreational use on the river? Believe it or not, we did have traffic control in the river during major operations to ensure folks at Baylor didn't get in a bind or anybody using the river for recreational canoeing and so forth, that nobody got into a situation where it was unsafe. It's a very tight area. The frontage road bridges had been previously constructed, and now here we are trying to take down existing bridges in the middle to build new. So a lot of tight area to put a lot of heavy and large equipment in. And then work plan. You know, a lot of barge use was used. It was every day down there. It was like playing chess with different pieces. Those barges have limitations, so to make sure we didn't overload them, we didn't make sure any toppled over and a crane went falling into main lanes or falling anywhere else. All that had to be considered before we even got started. And then concrete placement, and you'll see some photos of that in just a second. So here we go again. We're demoing bridge. The Weber used these barges They would tie them up and connect them underneath the existing structures to capture all the debris falling. They'd use old traffic barrier to kind of square it off so it wouldn't pop off into the river. Um, so they did an excellent job. We had zero incidents from what I recall of getting any material or having any issues environmentally on the river. Some other uses that we had, we used turbidity barriers to capture anything potentially that might get in as a secondary precaution. Another cool operation is to remove the existing shafts for the Brazos River Bridge. The plans originally called for scuba divers to come in and go down and basically torch the columns and then lift them up out of the water. Weber didn't think this was a real safe way to do it and came up with an alternate demo method, and we wholeheartedly agreed. They came out with what I call a cigar cutter machine because it kind of looks that way. Binded it on top of each column, sent it down, and just chopped it off. So we removed a high-risk safety element during demolition. Then during construction, some key things or challenges that we faced was ensuring that bulkhead construction was done within the limits allowable on the barges, making sure those spud anchors that keep the barge in tow, keep it in place, that they didn't impact the existing bridges, and we had plenty of clearance. We had special equipment on pump trucks to prevent any spillage into the Brazos River. We had to continuously monitor the water levels. There is a dam controlled situation on the Brazos River, not too far from 35. If we had excessive rainfall, obviously that's going to change characteristics on the river right here. So we continuously monitor that. And then concrete pumps setups, you'll see some pictures of that in just a second, but we had a lot of mass placements that occurred during extreme weather events. Weber actually used huge blowers to put in between the beams at one point to maintain temperature during deck placement. Right here, we've got drill shafts going in the river. I have the scuba diver there on the right, maybe asking, well, you just said scuba divers weren't involved. Well, we ran into a problem at the river. We hit an unknown obstruction. Not uncommon, but not knowing what it is in very muddy water creates a lot of concern, especially when you're on a tight schedule. So we made the decision to bring in scuba divers at this point to go down and investigate to figure out why the drillers couldn't get through this obstruction. Turns out we believe it was old equipment that either found its way into the river during a collapse situation there off the bank several years ago. We never really fully got the answer, but I think that's what we were leaning towards. But once we sent the scuba diver down, we had confirmation, and the driller was able to get a special auger out there to get through the rest of the material. Another challenge was getting these massive monolithic arch columns tied. The guys would do these on the barges and then lifting them up and putting them in place. You can see there we're pouring one at night right off the bank of the river, the pump truck. Then we get into beam placement, and very nervous situation here. We're in very tight right away. We had to come up with a plan on how to get the beams out over the middle of the river. Essentially, the contractor would pull in beams off the highway right here, back them up, and then back them down this haul road right here over the bulkhead and angle them around the bent cap or the bent right there to get them on a barge to go set them out on the river. So quite the intricate dance. And there's our Cheeto truck. This is one of our favorite pictures. And just some more photos of how we brought the beams on the barge and moved them out over the river to set them. This picture on the left was taken, I think around, I want to say like March timeframe of 2020. Picture on your right was taken at the end of summer in 2020. We've got our panels on. Some other challenges that we dealt with the Brazos River, when we first got started with the demo, we discovered lead paint on the top flange of existing girders. That was not planned, so we had to have the environmental folks come out and clear those before we could proceed. We talked about the unknown obstruction. The other issue that happened during construction was when we were doing the bolt installation on the steel girders, we were having a shearing failure issue. So we had a huge meeting out in the field. We had TxDOT, we had the division involved. Turns out at that point in time, I think we were probably the leading candidate to determine that we had a material problem in the state. We were getting shipments of bolts were coming out that were having this issue statewide. So that problem cleared up over a couple of months. I think they got the manufacturer on the right path, but all projects were alerted of the issue, and we had to step up our inspection to ensure that that each bolt was installed correctly. And the picture on the right is cool because this is what we had to do to pour the bridge deck and other mass placements over the river and setting up 2 pump trucks. One to pump it to the truck on the barge, and then the other pump truck to pump it out for the bridge placement. So when we got to the other side and built the northbound bridge, we had even less room to set beams. So what we did, we worked with the district to determine and the contractor to determine, hey, we can use the existing frontage road bridge to set beams, but that didn't come without a challenge because that existing bridge has those suspension cables that run. So the risk there involved potentially getting a beam hung up in those suspension cables. So this process, we took our time with it. It was very detailed, but we were able to utilize that existing frontage road bridge, which was a big help in getting the beam set over the river. So some last pictures here of the bridge setting. We've got the beams in place. Again, probably about a 6-month time period between what you see on the left and what you see on the right as we were wrapping up construction in 2022. And for the interest of time, I'll skip this video. I had this one in here because it kind of shows you a day in the life of the project. We had roughly 200 contractor personnel on the project every day. That's what it took to get it done. Because of the incentive package that TxDOT had set up, we had a contractor ready to work day 1. We were literally out there removing pavement, removing grade, and excavating, starting utility work all the same day. So another attribute to the innovative approach that the district took in this contract setup. Clayton, you want to talk about the results?
Okay, we'll go quick. So the big thing to highlight here is that top bullet. Despite the challenges that Blake went over, despite a major drainage redesign on the project that was approaching $10 million, despite multiple utility issues, despite COVID, despite 2 winter weather events, I think everybody's familiar with the TxDOT ransomware attack at this point, but despite all that, 0 days added to the job. Through those events, 0 time suspensions granted. So I think, again, that's just a testament to, one, the contract that was put in place, but then primarily the teamwork, as Blake mentioned earlier. Slide to come up. So this graphic just kind of highlights some of the time savings. On the far left is an estimate of if TxDOT would have gone with a traditional bid package. You're looking at a 60-month duration project. Considering that 25% increase we historically saw, you're pushing that to 75 months. With our contract, that automatically drops down to 46 months at the bid table. And then through the effort on the project, actually dropped down to 42 months. So you're looking at 33 potential months of time savings there. So when you talk about $15 million worth of incentive and you go back to that $100,000 a day road user cost we mentioned earlier, that's roughly $3 million to the traveling public. When you consider that over 33 months, the $15 million is a very small investment for that type of return. So again, just wanted to take a moment and thank our partners, BGE, Weber, City of Waco, Baylor, Belmead. Again, we couldn't have done it without this group. At short course a couple of years ago, for anybody that heard it, our district engineer said that, in order for a contract like this to work, everybody has to have the mindset that the contractor is going to earn every penny of that incentive. If you're not working towards that, it's not going to be a success. And I can honestly say that's what everybody you see here on the slide had in mind throughout the entire life of the project. So again, here's just another testament to the effort and the teamwork. I think we've added a couple since then, but the project has actually won several awards because of the results and the effort put in. So just wanted to take a minute to highlight that. That will open it up to any questions.
Question and a statement. Not only have you won a lot of awards, this is the award of merit winner for ASCE Texas. I'll be getting the award on in Frisco this fall. But my question is, you said in spite of COVID, I thought would be COVID probably helped you because didn't that keep the traffic levels down?
You know, certainly lessened up some of the local traffic. We got to take advantage of some of those lane closure hours as a result. Maybe allow some closures that we normally would not have. So yes, it actually was probably a net benefit to the project at the end of the day.
Please raise your hand with any questions.
Thank you. Do you think that y'all learned something here that could be applied to when I-35 gets lowered in Austin, particularly from the way you had to stage your beams and handle some of the water issues? That's going to be a very similar situation when they get ready to lower that. Did TxDOT learn a lot from that? And would they apply that knowledge to construction in Austin? And would they do the same type of incentives that y'all did here?
So as far as the incentives, I'll freely admit this is probably not applicable to every single project out there. You know, one of the things that you've got to consider is the right of way and utilities. With an A+B type project, obviously you're looking for a quote unquote clean project at letting. So that's a decision. As far as construction techniques, I know that our director of construction in Waco and in Austin have been in communication about the contract and some of the things in this job. So yes, I would think that some of those lessons would go forward, and we're more than happy to sit down with any district that has questions as well.
You pump it twice. What kind of slump are you dealing with?
That
When you pump it twice with the concrete, what kind of slump are you dealing with?
You would ask a detailed question like that, would you, Randy? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I will let you know that we had no issues. The mixture tested, met specification, even with the setup. I think my concern was, you know, if we're waiting to send it out on a barge, are we going to have even more problems than trying to do something innovative here and go pump to pump? So luckily it worked out. I think the bigger risk that we had out here was that the timing. Every time we were doing something major on the Brazos River, it was during winter or summer. So the extreme temperatures and changes, like I said, we literally had huge blower fans in between those steel beams to keep that deck from freezing, to keep it at the temperature it needed to be at, because we had such an aggressive schedule to meet.
Let's have a round of applause.